Hey, so I already made this video, but it didn't upload, so I'm a little late. But this week's topic is internalized transphobia. And this is a really important topic because it's something that we tend to gloss over. I think it's really pertinent to most trans people just because we tend to internalize negative views that society has about us, which is a sociological theory called the looking glass self. And, well, I think that those negative thoughts can be pretty damaging, especially if they're unaddressed. So, I thought I would talk a little bit about how internalized transphobia affects me and what I do about it, what I think people should do about it. The number one way that internalized transphobia affects me is thinking negative thoughts about myself in regards to my transition. And one major thing that I find myself thinking is that I'm weird or freaky or really, really different and that this is negative. Um, just as a short note before you get really invested in the video, I guess I'm 1 minute in. Some of this conversation might be triggering or upsetting or offensive to some people. So tune out if you think that would be you. So anyway, I catch myself occasionally, especially when I'm fairly depressed, thinking things like, why did I transition? Now my body is weird, and I will always be weird. I will always be really different, and I don't really fit in, and this is just a very bad, bad thing. And obviously, those are pretty downer kind of thoughts to have. There's definitely this view in our society. There are men and there are women, and women have breasts and vaginas, and men have no breasts and penises, and that's how things are. They can biologically reproduce, and this is natural. This is how evolution worked, and everything in our psychology is sort of latently, animalistically about this. And I find myself feeling left out of this. Like I'm somehow less human because this doesn't describe me. For instance, I love my girlfriend and want to be with her, and I want to have children, but I know that my girlfriend and I cannot biologically reproduce together. And I guess this sort of relates to homosexuality as well. But I find myself reading a lot about anthropology and evolutionary psychology thinking like I don't see myself in this because I'm supposed to love my girlfriend and want to have children with her so that I can carry on my line and my genes and everything, and I don't feel that way, and because I won't carry on my lines and genes with her. So I just feel left out of the human experience sometimes, and I find myself thinking negative thoughts about myself, like maybe you should be more of a person. People have normative genders. Blah, blah, blah. And I find myself, I just don't fit into my own worldview, because ideally the world would be fairly black and white, and ideally in my head there are men and they're manly and there are women and they're feminine, and not in an anti-feminist kind of way, but in a men are manly in the sense that they have male bodies kind of way, and it just seems so sensible, especially since most of us grew up with that being the case. And yeah, some men can be gay and some men can dress in drag or something, I guess, but men are generally men, right? And so when I leave myself out of my own worldview, which I know better than to have because I know genderqueer people and intersex people and all of these things, and I know that these categories aren't natural by any means, that's internalized transphobia. Then also, I find myself thinking, I wish that I were cisgender, but not in a way that would remove my oppression, but I wish that I were cisgender because I don't fit in at all, and I want to, part of me, I think, latently wants to be prejudiced against trans people, but because I'm trans, I can't be. These are all deep, deep down, like pushed down feelings, and they aren't very common. They don't come up a lot, but they're there. I think they're probably there for most trans people, and I would not. I don't think I would expect myself to have these feelings. my best friend is trans. I'm trans, and I was gay before I was trans. So like, it's not like I ever have really been heteronormative or gender normative or anything. So I've had a long time to deal with these things, but I do feel them. Another separate, I'm gesticulating a lot. Another separate way that internalized transphobia comes up in my life is being really mean about other trans people, and that's awful. But it happens. I mean, my friends do this, and it's bad, bad, bad. But thinking, oh, that guy's name is weird. That guy's name is so weird, and he's spelling it weird. I don't understand why he's doing that. He must be so 16 or 14 or 12 or whatever, because who names themselves that? And yeah, that's a bad thing to think. Like, obviously, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but that person probably spent like years, okay, at least days, agonizing over their name, and it probably has deep meaning to them. And it's kind of, I don't know. All right, this is a theory. Bear with me. It's kind of part of trans culture, and that's our culture. And even if we don't participate in it that way, naming yourself Aiden or Jaden or whatever, like, that is kind of like when people name their kids things that speak to their ethnicity. It's different, but you know, it's mean. It's mean to make fun of people, and it's mean to, and kind of transphobic to say, like, oh, trans guys can't name themselves. They always name themselves bad things. Yeah, that's, no, bad. It's also transphobic, internalized transphobia, to be like, oh my god, that person is so feminine. Why are they transitioning? I don't understand. They still wear dresses, or they wear girls' jeans, or sometimes they're comfortable with their birth name, or I heard that they let people call them female pronouns sometimes, or once they call themselves a lesbian. Like, yeah, they can still call themselves trans, and it's not up to us to identity police, but I find myself doing that sometimes, and I'm sure that other people do, but that's internalized transphobia. Another, just like to change gears back, because I forgot something that relates to me, is sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm so feminine, I sit feminine, I walk feminine, and I'm like super feminine. Why did I transition? There's something wrong with me because now I'm a feminine man. And that's like partially internalized homophobia, because I think it's kind of homophobic to think, I don't know, not homophobia. Think of a better word. It's just internalized men should be masculinist. That has a word. Anyway, but it's also internalized transphobia, because I don't go around saying, that woman wears pants, they shouldn't be a woman, or things like that. So if I give cisgender people a wide berth for them to like experiment with their gender, why shouldn't I give that to myself? I can be a feminine man, but I find myself thinking, like, am I too feminine to be a man? And I think that's partially insecurity, but it's also a little bit internalized transphobia. So what to do about those things? Because I just spent like 8 minutes telling you what internalized transphobia is. The best thing to do is to correct your thinking. So stop thinking that. Easier said than done. Mostly just remind yourself that, like, no, wrong. Trans people are good. You're okay. You're not too weird. And being weird is okay. You need to look at the world in a complicated way, and things don't always fit into boxes, and you won't always fit into a box, and that's really disappointing and hard to hear sometimes, but it's also important to hear because that's the way the world works. Another way to deal with internalized transphobia is to go to therapy and talk about it, and I know that I suggest this all the time, but therapy is mostly good, particularly if you have a good therapist. And I guess the third thing to do to deal with internalized transphobia, because I love lists, I love things that come in threes, is that you should be more open to other people and communicate with your community and try to be less judgmental. And none of these things are very helpful because you're watching this video and you're like, yeah, how am I going to do that? I don't know, because because I'm dealing with those things. But it's good to be aware of them, and I think that being aware of them is definitely the first step. And the next step is probably trying to deal with them in some really convoluted way that's going to take a long time because it's hard to undo years of oppression that you've packed into your mind. And related to this topic that I just wanted to say was there's also a lot of trans misogyny, which is like against our trans sisters. I feel like a lot of us think it's okay to be a trans man, but to a certain extent don't think it's as okay to be a trans woman. And it is as okay to be a trans woman, and there's nothing wrong with trans women, and they're great. And we should be good allies to them because just sort of like being gay is not like knowing what it's like to be a lesbian. Being a trans man is not knowing what it's like to be a trans woman. So we need to ally ourselves together and be nice to them and be respectful and try to understand them. The end.